Hey everyone, it's Tom here from Ludicrous feed. Thank you so much for joining us today. In this video, we'll be discussing an article written by Nirav Bhatt from Zecar, and it is titled Inner West Council Successfully Trials Legal EV Charging Over Footpath. So this is a fantastic topic to discuss because this is certainly one of the barriers to EV adoption for those who don't have off-street parking. So the article by Nirav is as follows. These are the key points. So Inner West Council in Sydney has successfully trialled a program since September 2023, so more than a year now, allowing residents without off-street parking to charge EVs, electric vehicles, via cables across footpaths using free permits. So what are the requirements of the permit? So one, EV charging cables must be removed after use. A safety cable cover is mandatory, as shown in this picture, and permits must be displayed during charging, as shown in this example. So what are the motivation for the trial? What is the motivation? So inner city areas like Sydney's inner west lack off-street parking for 65% of households compared to the state average in New South Wales of 30%. Without home charging, residents rely on expensive public chargers, which cost significantly more than home electricity plans. Of course, home charging costs can be as low as 8 cents per kilowatt hour for some people, or even free during off-peak times, depending on which plan you're on and which energy provider you're with. While public chargers typically cost 50 cents per kilowatt hour or more, sometimes almost $1, and very rarely past that amount in Australia. Advocates stress the need for equitable charging solutions to encourage EV adoption, of course. So what are the results of this trial of the Inner West Council in Sydney? So 60 households are currently participating, with most successfully charging their EVs using excess solar energy or off-peak electricity when they can secure a parking spot, which in itself is a challenge sometimes in the inner west of Sydney, of course. Participants appreciate the flexibility but recognise the need for other charging options due to parking space challenges. Advocates of this also suggest adopting gully charging solutions like those in the UK. For example, a brand like CurboCharge have been trying to implement that here as well to improve safety and aesthetics. A mix of solutions, including public AC/DC chargers and home-based footpath charging, is deemed necessary for urban areas. Calls for the trial to require faster home chargers, for example 7 kilowatts or 11 kilowatts, to reduce the time vehicles occupy the space. And this trial is initially a one-off program, but the trial has been extended and with a review date in July 2025, so about 6 months from today. The trial has potential to inspire similar policies across other Australian councils, as withdrawing popular programs may face voter backlash. Interesting commentary there. So let's break down the article here. So Inner West Council in Sydney. So the inner west of Sydney is a very densely packed area, a very, I guess, what you call traditional old heritage area of Sydney. Not much off-street parking, very nice, beautiful, I guess Victorian style houses, terraces, a lot of bungalows as well from, the 19th century, 18th century sometime. No, not so much 18th, probably 19th century, early 20th. So beautiful houses, but a lot of them don't have driveways or off-street parking. So this, I guess, inner west of Sydney is a great place to implement something like this and to trial it. So what are the requirements of the permit? So EV charging cables must be removed after use. That makes sense. Safety cable cover, as you see in this picture here, and permits must be displayed as well. That makes sense too. So I think, one of the arguments against doing something like this is, of course, public safety, right? But for me, I think having a cable cover like this is probably okay. At least it's bright colored, like in this picture here, it's bright orange. It's not a huge obstacle. It's still sort of a smooth bump over the cable, and the cables aren't themselves very thick either. Most charging cables, especially if you use like a mobile connector, these cables are quite thin. Obviously, they get a bit thicker once you get to single phase and three-phase wall connectors. But having a decent cable cover that's well labeled, potentially having maybe a witch's hat or a cone next to it might be useful as well. Possibly an accessibility issue for those in wheelchairs or with other accessibility issues, so something to consider as well. And of course, the liability issue comes into play as well. Who is liable if an injury or an accident occurs while these cables are on the street? Does it lie with the person charging the car, so the owner of the vehicle? Does it lie with the owner of the house or the premise? Does it lie with the council? Who is liable if something were to happen? So I guess with a permit, I'm sure there's a disclaimer in there saying you are liable for any injuries that occur. But having said that, it is on council land. So again, if any lawyers out there in the audience are watching this, let us know in the comments section below who is liable for any incidents like this. Yes, so in the inner city of Sydney, the 65% of people don't have off-street parking. So that's some stats to back up what I said, compared to New South Wales average of 30%. In my area here, I'm pretty lucky. We've got a lot of houses here with off-street parking, bigger plots of land. I personally don't need this, of course. I've got a garage and driveway, so not a big issue, but I can understand places like the inner west will need this. Places with more densely packed housing, like apartment blocks, at least they've got undercover parking. So another challenge there is to get strata to comply, to accept that this needs to happen if we're to accept EV adoption, especially with retrofitting EV chargers, right? There's still a lot of, I guess, myths and possibly misconceptions about fires happening in in apartment buildings. Of course, that's probably a topic for another day, but I won't digress too much. But let's go back to the inner city of Sydney with, I guess, more housing type dwellings rather than apartment blocks. And of course, without off-street parking and charging, residents in these areas are disadvantaged. Of course, they have to rely on public chargers, which, generally speaking, are more expensive than home charging. Because at home, you're paying for your tariff, your home electricity tariff. So you might be lucky enough to have free charging during the day with some plans. Some EV charging friendly plans too charge only, like, for example, maybe 8 cents per kilowatt hour, sometimes less. But at the most, you probably you shouldn't pay more than 30 cents per kilowatt hour for a standard plan, and don't charge if it's expensive, like 50 cents, 60 cents during peak periods, right? So only charge during cheaper periods of the day, or even better, during solar, when the sun's out, using solar charging. So without off-street parking, this is an issue for people living in densely populated areas like this without off-street parking, where you can't access electricity from your home to charge your car due to restrictions like this, unless there's a trial going on, like what the inner west of Sydney is doing, which is great. So public chargers can typically cost a lot more money. So the average DC charger I've seen around town can have a fee of up to 60, 70, maybe 80 cents per kilowatt hour. Sometimes they have a time of use, as well, where during busy periods it's more expensive, cheaper during off-peak, of course. So, and of course the inconvenience as well, having to drive your vehicle out to some public area. They're not always readily available. Not because there's not many of them, but because sometimes they're used. If everyone's trying to charge after work, then it's going to be hard to find one. There's nothing like charging at home, right? This is one of the greatest benefits of EV adoption, if you have the luxury of being able to do that. So without this, then a lot of that convenience does fall away. So this is great that the inner west of Sydney is doing this. So there's 60 households currently doing this. I'm surprised there's not more. I reckon because the word isn't out yet. So hopefully with this video, there'll be more people in the inner west, applying for this permit, because it is free currently. So I'd be interested to know how many actually increase after this video. So hopefully, if you're watching from the inner west of Sydney, tell us what you think, whether you will be applying for this. And then, if you work from home, if you're at home during the day or during the weekend, and if you can have this solution where you've got a safety cover over the lead to plug into your car, then you can take advantage of nice weather like today, where it's nice, bright blue sky. You can take advantage of free solar charging, which is fantastic, or even off-street electricity during the nighttime, of course. This allows you to be more flexible. You can charge whenever you want, as opposed to having to drive out to a public DC fast charger. So other considerations, right? So we've got other brands like Turbocharge, as mentioned in this article, doing gully charging solutions, where there's a trench in the footpath. To improve safety, you could possibly have a cover over the trench and then charge your car that way, so you don't even need a cover. I've seen this in Oxford in the UK in my trip to the UK early this year. Have a look at my video where I did that, walking around Oxford on the streets there. They've got these trenches. I'm not sure what they're there for exactly, maybe for water drainage. But imagine if you could put a charging cable there in the trench going out to your car parked on the street, and then you can have a solution right there, and then just have a very flat cover covering that trench as well, just for safety, which would be really good. So hopefully more councils, particularly those in the inner areas of Sydney, Melbourne, Brisbane, Perth, Adelaide, will be more progressive on this topic and on this issue, and allowing EV chargers, EV owners to charge their vehicles in this regard, with whether it be a safety cover over the footpath, trench charging, pop-up chargers. There's lots of solutions here. A lot of companies are now doing telegraph pole charging solutions, where you're mounting an EV charger on a telegraph pole or a street pole, which is very handy as well. And there's obviously calls also for faster charging, so that way you're not having that cable on the street for too long, because if you've got a mobile connector, you're only getting 2.4 kilowatts, so you're having to charge a lot longer than, say, a dedicated EV charger that can charge at either 7 kilowatts or 11 kilowatts or even 22 kilowatts for those cars that can accept that kind of charge. So you're not having to have that cable on the street for much longer than necessary, so which is great to see. So one-off trial, which is going to be extended to July 2025, which is fantastic. So yeah, hopefully we'll get some data, some feedback on this trial, and hopefully we'll have a follow-up video for you next year. If hopefully Inner West of Sydney can publish their results for us, that'd be fantastic. All right, well, thank you so much for watching, everyone. Again, leave your comments below what you think about this program, whether you think it's okay for councils to have this solution for densely populated areas of our cities to allow EV owners to charge their cars on the street. Is it a public hazard? Do you think it's okay? Who's liable for this? Should there be some form of personal responsibility in areas where there are, cables running across the street, adequately covered, of course? I mean, streets, the stuff on the street anyway, right? People are doing roadworks. You've got to look where you're going, right? So again, there's two sides of the story, and I'd love to hear your thoughts on that too. So I'm Tom from Ludicrous Feed. Thank you so much for watching as always. Until the next video, happy charging.